Hello, scientists! Take a look around this beautiful forest ecosystem in Pennsylvania. It seems like the perfect picture of natural beauty. But what if I told you that this forest hasn't always looked this healthy? In fact, this very forest was once an example of a tragedy of the commons. In the 1800s, new settlers in Pennsylvania saw the sprawling forests as an opportunity for economic growth. They rapidly cut down trees to build railroads and ships and to fuel their growing economy. But by 1895, 2/3 of the forests were gone. The demand was high, the supply was low, and the environmental costs piled up. Luckily, the Department of Forestry in Pennsylvania has worked to slowly restore these forests to the thriving ecosystem we see today. Remember the economic factors we looked at last time? These factors can be used to make decisions about shared resources. But even with these economic considerations, humans can still use resources too quickly. This overconsumption can lead to resource depletion. Economic factors alone aren't enough to help us make the best decisions about shared resources. We also need to focus on sustainability. Today, we will define sustainability and identify its core principles. Then we'll create a resource management plan using what we've learned to guide us. Are you ready, scientists? Let's dive in. When the timber was being used quickly in Pennsylvania, economic factors weren't the problem. The problem was the lack of focus on sustainability. Think about the word root sustain. Based on this word, what do you think sustainability means? Pause the video here to record your thoughts. The word sustain makes me think about keeping something going for a long time. Maybe you thought about sharing resources with everyone, or about using resources slowly over a long time. If so, you're on the right track. Sustainability means using resources in a way that meets our needs today without using them up or harming the environment so future generations can meet their needs too. It's about understanding that resources are limited and making careful choices to protect them for the long term. Now that we know what sustainability is, why was the Pennsylvania timber example not sustainable? Pause the video here and record your thoughts. People were so focused on the short-term economic gains from cutting down timber, they ignored the future use of the resource. This not only harmed the environment, but it also left them unable to sell timber after the forests were depleted. So, what could have been done differently? There are 5 core principles of sustainability to help guide us. Let's break them down one by one as we explore a more sustainable timber management plan. Be sure to record each principle in your lesson video notes as we go. The first principle of sustainability is intergenerational equity. It's the balancing act between today's needs and tomorrow's needs. Intergenerational equity is about managing resources so that future generations will have access to. It's about thinking ahead. How do we use what we need now while still leaving enough for people in the future? Intergenerational equity helps us avoid resource depletion by planning and managing our resources wisely. Let's take our forest as an example. We rely on timber for things like construction and furniture, but if we cut down all the trees today, what will be left for future generations? A sustainable plan focused on intergenerational equity might limit how much timber can be harvested each year. For instance, forest managers could allow a small amount of mature trees to be cut each year, keeping much of the forest standing. This way, there will always be more trees growing to replace the ones we use. But how do we decide which trees to cut? This brings us to the second principle of sustainability, resource efficiency. Think about the word efficiency. What do you think resource efficiency focuses on? Pause the video here to record your thoughts. Resource efficiency means using resources in smart ways to reduce waste and get the most out of what we take. For example, if we're limiting how many trees we cut, we need to make sure we're using every part of the trees we do harvest and selecting those trees carefully. Together, intergenerational equity and resource efficiency help us balance today's needs with the needs of future generations. But sustainability doesn't stop there. We also have to think about the environmental impact of how we access resources. Sustainable resource management also ensures future access to resources by protecting the environment. If a forest ecosystem is healthy, trees can continue to grow in the future. If there's water pollution, soil erosion, or a decrease in biodiversity, the ecosystem balance could be thrown off, preventing future tree growth. This is why environmental stewardship, the next core principle of sustainability, is so important. Environmental stewardship is the responsibility to care for the ecosystem when we use resources. One way to do this is to carefully watch the ecosystem as we're extracting resources. For example, as we cut down trees, we could restrict harvesting around sensitive areas, like the trees that house nests for protected bird species. But using one resource, like timber, can also impact other parts of nature. This leads us to the fourth principle of sustainability, systems thinking. Systems thinking is the idea that ecosystems are interconnected, so any changes to one part of it affects everything else. When making decisions, it's important to consider the connections between the biosphere, geosphere, atmosphere, and hydrosphere to avoid harming other parts of the system. For example, a sustainable timber management plan not only cares for trees, but uses practices to cut them down that aren't harmful to water, soil, wildlife, or the rest of the ecosystem. Together, environmental stewardship and systems thinking ensure that environmental costs don't outweigh any of the economic benefits of accessing a natural resource. Sustainable decisions don't just focus on the what of a resource management plan, they also emphasize who has a say in forming the plan. Stakeholders are the people who are affected by environmental decisions or policies. Resource management decisions often have many stakeholders because these decisions affect how everyone can access essential resources. Different people may have different priorities, but everyone should benefit from resources without one group dominating at the expense of others. This brings us to the fifth and final core principle of sustainability. Social responsibility states that sustainable plans consider the needs of all people so that everyone benefits from resources. This is why it's important to look at sustainability from different perspectives. For example, who might be affected by decisions about forest management plans? Pause the video here to brainstorm your ideas in your lesson video notes. Logging companies and forest landowners would be affected by the ability to make money from timber. But there are plenty of other stakeholders too. Local communities rely on forests for jobs in industries like logging, tourism, and recreation. Indigenous groups may have cultural, spiritual, or subsistence ties to the land that need to be respected. Conservationists prioritize protecting the forest's biodiversity and ensuring healthy ecosystems. Even consumers, like you and me, who use timber for furniture, paper, and other products, are stakeholders in these decisions. When creating a sustainable resource management plan, social responsibility means including all voices and ensuring benefits are shared by everyone. By considering the needs of all stakeholders, sustainable plans create fairness and balance. Social responsibility ensures that the tragedy of the commons is avoided, not just for the environment, but for the people who depend on it. Sustainability is about balancing resource use so future generations can thrive. By following the 5 principles, intergenerational equity, resource efficiency, environmental stewardship, systems thinking, and social responsibility, we can make choices that protect our resources for a long time. Be sure to check out your lesson activities to practice identifying each of these core principles of sustainability. You'll then have the chance to create your own sustainable resource management plan for a resource in your household. Until next time, remember, you have the power to think and act sustainably. Keep learning today and keep thinking about tomorrow. See you next time.
Hey, hey.